Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. I'm your host, Dom DiTolla, with my co-host,
Chris Quinn.
All right, and today we've got a very special episode. To quote famous comedian Bill Burr, this one's for the ladies.
Yeah, this is our first woman athlete on this podcast.
And I couldn't think of a better woman to do. We were talking about it a couple weeks ago. A lady that I refer to as the female Bo Jackson, the versatile and very talented Babe Didrikson Zaharias.
Yeah, I didn't really know anything about her, being that she was born in 1911, and died in 56. But essentially was the first female true multi-sport athlete that was dominating.
Yeah, no, she was a superstar for that era, and for a woman to be a superstar athlete in the 30s, 40s, and 50s is pretty remarkable. I only honestly knew about her because my sister, when she was in elementary school, did a project on her, and living at home, I saw the research, and I'm like, this chick's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, she definitely was a great athlete. And this is the thing that I found is she went from pretty much every sport that women were allowed to play in that era and dominated.
She even went up against dudes.
Yes.
I mean, that's what made her so impressive, particularly for that time period, is she was pretty much a trailblazer for multiple sports for women.
Yeah, well, doing this research, I just kept thinking of, and I love sports movies so much, but I kept thinking of the Tom Hanks movie, the
League of
Their Own, where they make all these women play baseball in skirts, and that's pretty much what she was breaking down, was this rule of femininity that was you're either a butch-looking man or, you know what I mean, a beautiful, dainty woman, and she was a beautiful woman that was just absolutely destroying in all these sports, and it's one of these things that really it reverberated well after her death.
Oh yeah, I mean, you look at any top athlete list of the last half century, and male or female, and she's in the mix.
Yeah.
She's not only in the mix, I mean, it's not like she just played these sports as a side thing. I mean, whatever she set her mind to, she went out and kicked some ass.
Yeah. Well, let's get right into so she started.
So here,
you get into it. And then,
born June 26, 1911.
Yep.
As you said, in Texas. Her real given name is Mildred Ella Didrikson. That's what she was born as, to Norwegian parents. Babe came along later. There's some speculation on how she earned that nickname. Some people think it was because she was so dominant like Babe Ruth. But I think the original start of the name was because her parents were Norwegian. When she was a baby, they called her Bebe, which is translated to babe. So that's how she ended up, getting that nickname, and it just stuck, which is perfect.
Well, I bet it stuck because she was playing a lot of baseball and softball and dominating. So I bet people are like, yeah, that's Babe right there. It's one of those things where maybe it wasn't originally from Babe Ruth, but I bet it was associated later on and then continued.
Totally, yeah. I mean, that just totally makes sense. And she grew up playing all sorts of things. Like you said, baseball. She was into track and field, which we'll get into a little bit later.
Yep.
And just kind of rose through the ranks and given opportunities where there weren't a lot of opportunities for women in athletics at the time.
Yeah, she played, and this is what I found interesting, was she literally did everything that women were allowed to do: basketball, bowling.
Basketball, yeah.
And it's one of those things where it kind of listed these things that she was excelling in, and then it had a little footnote that was just and this was all the sports that women were allowed to play, and it was she literally went out and played them all, and accelerated at golf, I think, more than
that was her most dominant thing. I mean, like I had brought up before, with Bo Jackson, if they had marketing and Nike was a thing, it would have been Babe Nose instead of Bo Nose.
Yeah, exactly. She would have been hitting those towering home runs and sticking people in the backfield.
Oh yeah, I mean, she as far as the track and field, that was kind of what she shined at the beginning of her career. It's where she kind of burst out.
Well, I feel like that's where, and this is in the 1930s, that's where women could burst out was in the Olympics.
Yes, in the Olympics, because she was an amateur, and we'll get into that later with golf. But 1932 Los Angeles Olympics, she set 4 world records, won 2 gold medals and 1 silver, 2 gold medals in the 80-meter hurdles and the javelin throw. And the high jump was kind of controversial because she should have won a gold medal in the high jump. But what ended up happening, from what I had researched, was she had tied the woman that ended up winning as far as like the height of said jump. But what happened was they said she had a improper technique when she matched it, so they just gave her the silver medal.
I thought that was because I tried to research that, and I was actually extremely confused by it. There's obviously no video or anything that we can go back on, but it was almost one of those like Olympic boxing kind of controversies where they're just like
Roy Jones.
We're just gonna award this to this person because we liked the way she jumped, and it's like, wait, what?
Stop dominating, you bitch.
Exactly. I wonder if it had that. I wonder if she had that kind of biased against her of like, no, we're going to give it to somebody else because you've won enough, which is the absolute wrong and just the worst kind of attitude to have in an Olympic.
Yeah, I mean, it's competition.
It's
That's
competition,
what it is.
yeah.
What I found interesting, though, was she's the only person, male or female, to win gold medals in a running and a throwing event.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Like, how versatile is your athletic skill set to be able to do that? And she just went out and kicked ass.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty indicative of what her later career is going to be, or the way she can dominate in all these different aspects of being an athlete. And that's why she's rated as one of the greatest athletes of all time.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, as far as her basketball career, she was on the AAU team for like a club that had an athletic club that had all sorts of events. Her team, the Dallas Golden Cyclones, they won in 1931, the team championship. And then she won in 1932 for track for the Dallas Golden Cyclones. She placed first in 5 of the 8 events, I believe. And she was tied for first and 6th, won the whole damn thing, and she was the only person on the team.
Yeah. So other teams had full rosters of like, hey, this is our hurdle jumper. Hey, this is our sprinter. She literally was the only one in every event and won.
Yeah, like, how do you do that? How do you freaking do something like that?
It's this thing where she was a step above almost all the other female athletes at that time.
And what I can't figure out is like, it wasn't like she was this like massive woman. It's not like she's like a Brittany Griner in the WNBA just dominating just simply because of size.
Yeah.
She's 5'7", 126 pounds from what I had found out. That is like an average sized woman.
Yeah.
I mean, just all of that athletic talent packed into just a run of the mill package, you know?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like she really broke, and I'll bring this up a bunch, but broke the idea of what being a woman athlete was at that time. But I wonder if a lot of other women athletes at that time were watching her and being like, I could do kind of more like what she does.
Yeah.
And put that much more into it, because it felt like she was essentially putting everything she could into it, and maybe other women weren't.
Exactly. And by that same token, I'm glad you brought that up. You know, a lot of women and girls who watched her, it's like, okay, well, maybe I can't play like 10 different sports, but there's one thing that I'm really good at. And I see somebody going out and actually attempting it and doing well in it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like she was just competing against other women. What I found as a baseball fan really interesting was in 1934, she went and pitched in spring training games against professional baseball teams.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there was a unwritten rule set because of her and a couple of other women like her because of the Rockford Peaches days. But that was one of those unwritten rules that said, hey, we're not going to bring a woman to the...
Yeah, and like, but what I found so cool was that this is like in the mid 30s when she's doing this.
Yeah.
This is like a decade and a half before like a league of their own,
exactly.
The All-American Professional Baseball League for the ladies.
That's why I feel like she was such a trendsetter, such a, this,
Yeah, and
mold
it was never a gender thing from what I gathered from her. It was more of a I play sports, I
Yeah.
want to play at the highest possible level. Let's see what I have.
Yeah, and she did. That was I mean, really on all the sports. So like this is mid 30s, 34, 35, and then that's when she I feel like finds golf and really starts to excel, and really that becomes her sport.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up a
yeah.
couple more things on the baseball. So 34 spring training.
Baseball guy's going to bring up more things on baseball. Go
know,
ahead,
right?
man. Go ahead.
No, I just found it so cool.
No, I agree.
March 20th, 1934, she pitched one scoreless inning for the Philadelphia Athletics against the Brooklyn Dodgers. Gave up only one walk, no hits.
That must have been awesome to watch.
Oh, right.
That's something that I like, because obviously no film from that era, but it's one of those things where you have to have shown up, watched it, and been like, that was amazing.
Right. Just
one
like,
inning, good inning pitched.
Insane. Two days later, she pitched for the Cardinals against the Red Sox. Kind of got shelled a little bit, gave up 3 earned runs. And then the 25th of March, a few days later, for the New Orleans Pelicans, I guess they were a minor league team at the time, she pitched against the Cleveland Indians and pitched 2 scoreless innings and lined out on her only at bat. I mean, just to put wood on the ball as a man.
Yeah.
Jesus.
No, it's great. And you could see that she was and probably could have been a pitcher on these teams. 2 scoreless innings. Like she could have been it's hard to say because of how their pitching worked back then. It was not like it is now. But if it was like now, she could have been a middle reliever. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things where she could have played with men.
She could have competed.
Yes,
exactly.
She could have competed.
She wouldn't have been a dominant player, but you could see she would have been able to compete with the guys. And like you had brought up before, let's get into it. She's most famous for, though, golf.
And legitimizing women's golf.
Yeah, like women's golf was kind of like, scattered all over the place, not really unified, just kind of like not really recognized by the American public like men's golf was.
Yes.
So 1935, she starts golfing against men. At least she tried to, but she had to still keep her amateur status. So she's competing as an amateur in these events and just absolutely laying waste to the competition.
Well, it's interesting because golf, for its entire history, essentially has tried to keep women and minorities away from the golf course.
Yeah.
And to think back in 35, like in that era of when they were like, no, lady, get back in the kitchen, even more so than... it's crazy to think that she's just out there proving everybody wrong. Like literally, she was just destroying these guys.
Hey everybody, just want to take a quick break to let you know that our Sports Experience podcast is brought to you by Engle Studio here, and they're here in Tucson for all your recording needs. Oh yeah, like by 1947, she had not only won the British Ladies Amateur, she had won 3 Western Opens, which is like at the time a ladies major amateur events. So she's really starting to cook here and really starting to, make some noise, not only in women's golf, but just golf in general.
Yeah, just that. And that's the thing. She really starts to break down these barriers where before it's like, well, in ladies basketball or in ladies track, and with her, people are starting to say, well, in golf and in track, they're breaking down that first word before the sport. And she is just like the mold of that. Yeah.
A sports writer said, nobody excited the gallery more when they stepped into the tee stand, man or woman, as much as her and Arnold Palmer. That is some high praise right there.
Yeah, that's quite the company to be in.
Yeah, and overall, because her golf career as far as a professional wasn't very long, and we'll probably get into why later, she won 41 events on the tour.
Yeah.
And 10 majors.
So she was pretty much just laying waste to everybody else in the short time that she played.
She had 10 tournament wins in 20 days in 1950. 1950 was kind of like her golden year as far as golf because she won the Grand Slam across the board against the competition. I mean, that's like some Tiger Woods type dominance coming from Babe Didrikson Zaharias.
Yeah, definitely.
But she did run into some health issues, though. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about now because you always wonder what could have been with her.
Especially with golf, because if we see these players hit their stride later in life when they're like 40, like she was, and almost have other parts of their game really lock in. And her game was really locking in 1950. And then, you know.
Yeah, because by 1953, as she's just kind of sailing along, she ends up being diagnosed with colon cancer. And it kind of, diminishes her talent a bit, but she's so dominant that she keeps winning tournaments that in 1954, she won the U.S. Women's Open wearing a colostomy bag.
Yeah. That one was absolutely wild.
Can you imagine that everyone talks about like Jordan in the flu game, like, oh, Jordan got food poisoning from a pizza. Was he carrying a bag with his own shit around on the court? I mean, obviously golf's a lot more low impact.
I was going to say, but it has that swing where you're still.
I mean, look, not to be a dick, but if I'm in the gallery and I know she's wearing a colostomy bag, I am standing at the very back, frightened that that thing could open.
Exactly. There's definitely possibility of disgusting things happening, but the great aspect of the story is she went out sick and still won. It's such a commendable thing. It's such a thing that, and people still talk about her. That's why we're bringing her up, because she had all of these great achievements and then got sick and still won, and still played.
Like, how could you not look up to somebody like that, male or female, and go, not only are you tough, but you're good.
Yeah.
Like you're not letting it affect you. And the sad part for that is the fact that she ended up, beating it once and then it comes back.
Yeah, which normally happens with cancer. But.
Yeah, exactly. And it keeps killing you. But she won 9 tournaments. 9 after being diagnosed the first time.
Yeah.
Which unfreaking believable.
I wouldn't be surprised if you were like, man, and then that one time they wheeled her out in a wheelchair and she just hit that hole in one. But that's the kind of attitude she had, still being sick. Like, I'm still here and I'm going to play this until essentially I die.
Yeah, I'm not screwing around here.
Yeah.
Like, I'm here to win this entire thing if I can actually make it on a field or a course or a pitch or whatever she ended up doing.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about the golf is she won all these tourneys, and if you were essentially winning one of these, you had to beat her.
Yeah.
That's, like there wasn't, like golf today, you see guys kind of like dropping off and like somebody will win and then somebody else will win. It wasn't like that back then. Like if you were winning, you had to beat her.
Yeah.
Like she was second and you were first. That's the way those tourneys like laid out.
It was like Tiger
Yes.
sex scandal.
Yes.
Essentially.
Which I still want to talk, might bring this up, just Tiger and his sex scandal and the decline of his his game after that, which is so, I don't know if there was some mojo going on with that or...
It's like it's almost like the Boggs thing with his bang maid.
Yeah, with his mistress.
Like his batting average going up.
And since we're into the misogyny part of this episode, let's bring up.
Oh, can I bring up one more thing though about kind of breaking down barriers because of how important she was to just women's sports and sports overall. In 1948, she tried to enter the U.S. Men's Open.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she had applied and was more than qualified to at least compete. Not saying she would have won, but the U.S. Open denied her based on her gender.
Wow.
They blocked her out. Yeah,
of course.
Of course for the time, but it's like she paved the way for all these Annika Sorenstam's and Michelle Wees to actually go out and try.
Yeah,
because that's kind of what you're looking for.
Which is crazy to think that finally happened in the 2000s, and she tried in 48.
Oh yeah,
but that's how golf is like always the last. I feel like, but
it's the most even more than tennis.
Yeah,
yeah.
Which tennis is ridiculous. They make you wear the all white uniform and
yeah,
shit.
like with Agassi.
Like with Agassi, but it's still, golf is like minorities, women, get the hell out of here. And it's like literally recently, like we were saying in the 2000s, where they're like, I guess women could play in the Open. I guess it's an open tourney. Like, yeah, it's ridiculous.
But like in less than a decade, she won 41 tournaments.
Oh, I know. That's the thing about in that era too, 48, 49, 50, where she was really hitting the shit out of the ball. And like, she could have, you don't really know with golf at that time, she could have competed for a U.S. Open victory. That's what's ridiculous.
Oh, not only that, but just like because golf is one of those sports, we had talked about with Payne Stewart before, you can still be competitive in your mid to late 50s.
Oh, absolutely.
She could have won upwards of triple-digit tournaments, and Lord knows how many majors she would have won.
Yeah.
But her dominance allowed women's golf to kind of come together and be like a congealed, sport. It wasn't so scattered throughout the country. It was one governing body. It was like she's almost the reason the LPGA was invented.
Well, and I think about this through a lot of sports. They need these superstars that get people, the average person who isn't interested. Like even if they're not going to necessarily, they're aware of it.
They're aware of it, or they're tuning in because they heard about this woman that just picked up a golf club one day, a set of clubs one day, and was just like, "Oh, I can do this."
Yeah, and it's interesting because you see sports take a turn, and you see like the emergence of the LPGA. Like, it's so interesting. Like, you see basketball really coming together in the 80s. You see, I hate to say it, but hockey kind of falling apart in the end of the 90s, and we'll get into that. But it's so interesting to see these stars essentially take their sport to that next level, and it reverberate for decades.
And it's not just like. It's not just sports. It's like she poured everything in her being into other endeavors. Like, she was a skilled singer and harmonica player. I mean, she recorded 2 songs. I Felt a Little Teardrop and I believe Detour. Like, come on. You can't be that good at everything.
And this is pre-SoundCloud. I don't know if anybody understands how time works, but like, it was hard to record a song. Like, first off, you had to be really talented, and second off, you had to like really have the gumption to get out there and record. I mean,
she won the 1931 South Texas State Fair sewing competition.
Yes.
Like, all over the place.
The focus that she had in anything she did. I think that was something that, and this is what we keep hitting on, but I think it's something that we have to, she was such an example for women of that time who were constantly being told no. She was like, yes, I can do literally anything I put my mind to.
I can do whatever I want, and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
And what's crazy, though, is like, if you're into sports, you know who she is because she's that revered. But if you're not, because time has passed and there are all the opportunities for women now, a lot of people don't know who she is. A lot of people, she's almost been lost to history, despite the fact she has a museum dedicated to her in her hometown.
And she should. That's the thing. She should be more revered because of everything that she did. And it's hard to pinpoint because it took so many years for it to, I feel like, happen.
Yeah, because there's like that dark ages period after she dies until really the late 80s, early 90s, when women's sports becomes like a legitimate thing in the sports consciousness, like the wider sports consciousness.
The only sport that we can say outside of that is like tennis, and that was like in the 70s that started, and then other stuff. It's so interesting because and I want to get into her sexual orientation or the speculation thereof.
Yeah.
But I feel like women's sports was really looked at like a bunch of lesbians getting together and, doing whatever they do.
Because of the shitty, widely held belief amongst people of that time period. It's like, much like you said, everyone thinks that they're just a bunch of those types of people.
Yeah.
And they just dismiss it. They immediately dismiss it and don't look at the overall aggregate accomplishments that she had. And we'll get into it right now.
Yeah.
She was married. She was married to a gentleman named George Zaharias.
That's how she got her last name.
He was a professional wrestler with one of the greatest wrestling nicknames, I think. He was from Pueblo, Colorado, but his nickname was the Crying Greek from Cripple Creek.
That's awesome.
Cripple Creek is not like near Pueblo. It's an old dead mining town.
But the name just rolls off the tongue.
Oh,
You
yeah,
can't
it's
deny the
just perfect.
Crying Greek from Cripple Creek, you know?
They had no children, but she kind of, had met him throughout, her career, and they both got together, whether it was a relationship built on, convenience or, whatever at that time. It was what it was.
Well, I think it had to very mirrored the Billie Jean King situation where where lesbians of that time essentially tried to fight it themselves and see if they could get married and see if that would work, and it essentially wouldn't, and kind of fall apart. And that's when they realized, like, hey, I need to be myself.
Exactly. Just be who the hell you are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy for us to say now because
I was gonna say
at that time though, it had to be like super duper,
especially
scary
because she's in the spotlight, and it's so rare for a woman to be an athletic star. She's essentially the first one in America that if she came out and was a lesbian, they would have
everything would have been taken away from her.
Everything. And she would have essentially been vilified as, I mean, I don't really want to get into the religious side of it, but like she would have been, especially even in her hometown. I don't even know if they would have built a museum for her
home state.
Well, yeah, Texas. I mean, we could, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't think the attention to her accomplishments, like you were saying, would be treated like it is because of the way people treated same-sex relationships.
And the woman she was most famously linked to, they can neither confirm nor deny, but rumors about another fellow golfer at the time named Betty Dodd.
Yeah.
That was kind of where speculation and stuff was getting out. But and like you had brought up before, that's kind of the whole situation with the time period, is that you had to be so dominant at that time as a woman to be recognized for everything. And if something gets out, it can be taken all away in an instant.
Yeah.
And you'll just be lost to everything.
Lost to time.
Yeah.
And
she kind of is, which is unfortunate because you read about her and you're like,
that's what
why the hell? Like all you do is like, all you can really see now is just her name on lists of best athletes of the 20th century. But you don't know what she did until you research it.
That's why I think she was so great, because you're right. I kept seeing her on these lists and I was like, 54th best athlete of all time before I even started the research. And I was like, oh yeah, no, this makes sense.
Yeah.
Like all around athlete. Yes, I would agree. You know what I mean? Like it's really she is really a great example of sports transcending sports.
Sports transcending social norms almost.
Yeah.
Like, I wish more people would talk about her and her accomplishments. And I feel like we would be talking about her more because by 1955, with the cancer returning, her health is in decline.
Yeah, that's when...
If she had lived into the 70s, and
still played
golf, she would be much more recognizable. She would be a much bigger name. But
I wonder if women's sports would have came around that decade earlier. It's one. Yeah. You just never know. It's one of those what if.
Exactly. And by September 27th, 1956, she ended up dying from cancer, which is just damn unfortunate to see what could have been.
Yeah, it's always sad when somebody dies of cancer. But yeah, she was,
especially in the prime of her life as an athlete too, because she was in such great physical condition. But sometimes the genetic cards are just stacked against you, man. It just sucks.
Yeah, well, like we were talking about with Magic Johnson, he was lucky enough to be in the prime of his athletic condition when he caught HIV. She was not lucky enough to beat, cancer, it's obviously a completely different disease, but it's one of those things where you see athletes' times cut short. And for me, I don't think there's anything more sad in sports.
Yeah, and it's not like an injury where she can go on to do other things, because I can guarantee you, after her playing career ended, she would have been out on the front line saying, like, let us play.
Oh, I'm sure.
And just, it's tragic, but it's so refreshing to research somebody like this and do it on the podcast.
Yeah, and this is the first woman that we did, but we will be doing more women to come. I just felt like, and you actually brought her up.
Yeah.
But we felt like she was a woman that laid the groundwork for all these other women that we'll be talking about coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. So Babe Didrikson Zaharias, female Bo Jackson.
I like that. I figured
she really is. I mean, because of all the stuff she did. Yeah.
When he kept saying it, I was like, I hope he brings that up on the podcast. Female Bo Jackson, because she hit the shit out of the ball. She was a pitcher, but that's all right.
Yeah. Babe knows sports. That's what I'm leaving it as.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to that podcast. This is just a stock message at the end of all of our podcasts, so we hope you enjoy. You listen to whatever athlete that was. Give us a follow at the Sports Experience Podcast on Instagram. Also, myself at Quinn Comedy on Instagram. Also, DiTolla Dominic on Instagram. Just follow us all around. If you have any suggestions for any athletes you want us to do, shoot us an email at the Sports Experience Podcast at gmail.com. And we always are recording right here at Engle Studio. Thank you all very much.